Last year I did a video all about how to use Conkers as a substitute for regular washing powder, and in that video I mentioned how I switched from Soapnuts to Conkers, and it occurred to me that maybe I should have done that the other way around. So today I want to do an updated video covering Soapnuts as well, the pros and cons of both, along with a few of the things that I've learned about using Conkers soap along the way. Firstly, this is a soap nut. It's also called a soap berry. They're mostly grown in India, but they're also found in China, Hawaii, even Florida. The tacky to the touch kernel is what contains the saponins that wash your clothes. On its own, the kernel itself has a very sharp vinegary smell, but this doesn't translate onto the clothes if you've washed them with them. If you're very fond of having your clothes washed with fragrance, then you'll need to add an essential oil to the mix. On its own, all your washing is going to smell like is washed and wet. Just like the Conker alternative, they're an especially good switch if conventional washing powder is irritating to your skin or your lungs or your sinuses, and how to use them is simple. You take a handful, put them into a mesh bag that will allow water to pass through but not let the soap nuts crumble all over your washing, throw it into the wash with your dirty washing and then turn it on. Each handful can be reused 2 to 3 times each before they stop lathering well, and what I used to do with each new wash is I'd just add 1 or 2 soap nuts to what was already in the bag. It meant I didn't have to remember when I'd last refilled it, and the wash would always have a good supply of fresh soap nuts. One important thing to mention here is that after the wash you have to hang these up where they can dry properly. If you don't do this, the soap nuts are going to start to develop mould and mildew. Ideally have a hook somewhere in a bright dry place for them to hang in between each wash. And once these soap nuts are completely used up and crumbled, you can throw them straight into the garden compost bin. They're completely biodegradable, and that's the end of it once you're finished with them. Another thing to point out is that they work best in warm water. Cold or cool water won't get the best out of the soap nuts. It's still usable but nowhere near as effective. And lastly, with soap nuts and Conkers, you can't expect them to get out really tough stains. This will clean everyday oils, dirt and grease. But let's say you accidentally get some bicycle oil on your jeans, or maybe you scuff your hands in some ash and then get it on your white t-shirt. Those you're going to have to tackle on the side, either with a cleaning bar, with vinegar or another stain removal method before you put them into the wash. Now let's move on to Conkers. Horse chestnut, colloquially known as Conkers, are the nut you want for soap nut substitutes. You don't want to confuse these with actual chestnuts. Chestnuts, which are edible, have a distinctive spiky outer husk. Horse chestnuts or Conkers are not edible, but they're what you need to use for your washing, so you really don't want to confuse the two. Like I mentioned in my previous video, the first thing I do is break them up, since unlike the soap nut where it's the shell that has the saponins, with Conkers it's the inside of the nut that's important, not the shell. I've also since discovered that the fresher the Conkers are, the easier it is to break the shell, just with a knife instead of a hammer. It's much faster if you can do it with a knife, and I've been able to prepare and dehydrate a good 3 or 4 dehydrators worth in the time that before it would have taken me half a tray to do with a hammer. If you can catch them a few days fresh like this, when the shell is still red and shiny, cutting through that shell will be easy enough. Just don't use a small knife, instead you want to use something big, a long sturdy blade where you can slice the Conker up like you would a stubborn onion. This can be a little tough on your hands if you're preparing them in large batches, but it's much more efficient than using a hammer, I've found. I like to cut them in half and then slice that half into lines before I lay them out on the dehydrator with some baking paper underneath. Set it on a medium heat and then leave it for 6 to 8 hours overnight. By morning everything should be completely dry, and once I have enough to fill the laundry tin, I store anything that's left over in a storage tub with a few silica gels or with some rice in a bag in case there's any moisture left. If you get to the Conkers a little too late and the shell is dull and tough, then what you can do is soak the Conkers. I'll soak them for a minimum of 3 days. The shell is very tough, so it's not like soaking beans or chickpeas. You need a bit more time for the shell to soften. Then you can just cut them up and dry them either in the dehydrator or in the oven on the lowest setting with the door cracked open. You want to dry them out, not cook them. Once you want to use them, what you do is take a small scoop of dried Conkers, put them in a jug of warm water and leave them to soak for 6 to 8 hours. What I'll normally do is last thing at night, if I know that the next day I need to do a load of washing, then what I'll do is I'll put the Conkers out to soak, and if I know that washing is going to be particularly dirty or I want to make sure that it's extra clean, then I'll put double the amount of Conkers that I normally use. Just like soap nuts, these work best in warm water. It will still be usable in cold water, but if you want the best results, you want to do this on a warm wash. Before that goes into the wash, I'll stir the water for a minute and then pour it through a filter to make sure that no bits end up in the washing machine. If I want that washing load to be fragrance, then I'll add some essential oils like lemon or tea tree or lavender first and then pour in the Conkers soap. With each scoop of laundry liquid that I make, I reuse these maybe 3 times before I make the fresh batch. The second batch is always the frothiest out of the 3, and for that reason I like to save it for the dirtier clothes. One thing I want to mention when it comes to preparing the Conkers is that you really need to treat them as though they were Tide Pods. If you've used them in your dehydrator, then you need to clean those trays before you prepare anything edible on them. This is one of the reasons why I have a baking paper in between that and the tray underneath. The same thing goes for whatever you let the Conkers brew in. I like to use an old coffee maker to make the Conkers soap, but this is only ever used for making soap and never for drinking from. If you can't have a designated pot or a jug for your Conkers soap, then you need to wash it thoroughly. Think of it like a natural Tide Pod. It's great for washing, but it's terrible for your digestion. Another question that comes up quite regularly with Conkers soap is whether the shell can stain white laundry over time. Now, I haven't noticed this so far, but to be honest, I think this is because I try avoiding washing white items in the first soak, and the first soak always has a bit of a lime tint to it. And also, I regularly sun bleach my white items so they stay white, so I think this is a factor. And lastly, this is what I don't use it on. If you've been following my channel, you know that I use cloth nappies for my little boy, and I've been using reusable sanitary pads for myself for years as well. And when it comes to these, I use regular washing powder. I'm sure some people would be happy to use the natural alternatives, but for me it's just not something I'm willing to do. Like most things, it's going to vary from person to person whether this is a good switch for you or not. Either way, I hope you found the video helpful, and I'll have a new video for you soon. If you like my videos and want to see more content, feel free to follow me on the mailing list. Do not subscribe to me on YouTube. That way you get everything sent directly to your email, and I'll have a new video for you soon.